Growing up, one of my favorite movies that I always had on repeat was Hoodwinked. It's a hilarious movie that tells its story in such an interesting way that is so different from any other animated movie that I have ever seen. It's smart, funny, and most importantly, it's super entertaining. However, it also has become infamous due to the animation style. To put it bluntly, the animation sucks. And I feel like this has affected the film's legacy, because it's been pretty forgotten compared to other animated movies that came out during the same time. In an effort to find out why the animation was so rough, I was introduced to the bizarre story behind the film, and I'm here today to share that story with you.
And Keith, darn it, change your name, please. That's not scary, and I'm embarrassed to say it.
The story of Hoodwinked begins with the brother duo of Corey and Todd Edwards. Like all aspiring filmmakers, the brothers created their own production company, Blue Yonder Films, and moved to LA in 1999. They had trouble finding investors for the big features they wanted to make, so in order to make ends meet, they took up odd jobs in various sectors within the industry. These jobs ranged from editing for the Game Show Network, to directing Christian music videos, to creating direct-to-DVD movies. One of these direct-to-DVD movies was an animated Christmas movie called Wobots. It just so happens that Wobots caught the eye of Hoodwinked's future producer, Maurice Kanbar. Maurice Kanbar was an entrepreneur and inventor, probably most well known for his successful vodka company, Sky Vodka, but he also owned over 50 different patents for all kinds of inventions. This guy was pretty loaded, and he just so happened to have a love for the arts. More specifically, film. He was shown Wobots by another producer and was so impressed he agreed to meet the brothers face to face. The Blue Yonder Films crew pitched a ton of live-action movie ideas to Mr. Kanbar, but he had his heart set on an animated film, since he had always loved the medium and was so impressed by the brothers' previous animated movie. In an interview with Pathos.com, Corey Edwards recalled the meeting with Kanbar, as he told the brothers, "Well, really, I want to invest in a film that is based on a story that everyone knows, kind of the way Walt Disney started out, and then you guys put your own twist on it." So he gave Blue Yonder Films 1 month to write the script and then come back to pitch it to him, and if he liked it, then he would finance it. The brothers went off to write the film, racking their brains to try and think of a fairy tale that they could add their own twist on. They landed on the classic story of Little Red Riding Hood, and they wanted to tell the story through the lens of a police investigation. The film would explore the narrative through 4 different characters' perspectives, and tell the story in a non-linear fashion, in the likes of Memento, Rashomon, and Pulp Fiction. They brought the idea back to Kanbar, who fell in love with it and agreed to fully finance the film. At long last, the brothers found the investor for their feature film. More producers were brought on to the project, such as veteran Disney animation producer David Lovegren. Editor Tony Leach was also brought on, who actually contributed so much to the story he was given a screenwriting credit. Now, it was finally time to go into production. It's finally time to address the elephant in the room and answer the question everyone's been asking about this film since its release. Why does it look so weird? There's several sources online which state the film's budget. Some say 30 million, some say 15 million. However, the director himself, Corey Edwards, stated that the film was made with just under 8 million. If you know anything about animated movies, you know that this figure is super small for a fully animated feature film. For comparison, let's look at other animated movies that came out in 2005. Robots by Sky Blue Studios was made on a budget of 80 million. Madagascar by DreamWorks Animation was made on a budget of 75 million. Chicken Little by Walt Disney Animation was made on a budget of 150 million. One thing you'll notice is that all these films are from major studios, and Hoodwinked was entirely independently funded. Even Corpse Bride by Tim Burton and Laika Entertainment was made on a budget of 40 million, and those are considered smaller studios. Since the filmmakers had a tiny budget, they didn't have access to the equipment and trained animators that big companies like DreamWorks and Disney had. So they had to come up with a different plan, and a very inexpensive plan at that. Remember that past Disney animation producer I mentioned earlier, David Lovegren? Well, back in 2001, he was sent to the city of Manila in the Philippines to start up a hands-on independent animation studio and hire a team of animators to crank out cost-conscious cartoons and animated features. However, they never lured any productions there, and the whole studio folded, which meant those animators had to find other jobs. But soon after, Lovegren joined the Hoodwinked crew, and he went back out to the Philippines and rehired about 20 of those animators. They created their own animation studio in a 5,000 square foot rented house in Manila. However, schedule and budget restraints led the filmmakers to also enlist Prana Studios in Mumbai, India, to perform lighting and composition. One thing you'll also notice about the animation in this film is that the characters don't move the same way we are accustomed to in other animated feature films, compared to something like The Incredibles, where each of the characters' movements are very fluid. All the characters in Hoodwinked move very jerky and sudden. This is because the filmmakers were trying to imitate how characters move in stop-motion animation, taking big inspiration from the classic Rankin Bass cartoons. In an interview with Animation World Network, Corey Edwards had this to say about the choice. If we approach our look like that, photographed miniatures in stop motion, and if that nostalgia resonates with our audience as far as the look, then we're not going to have to shoot ourselves in the foot trying to put every freckle and hair on photoreal creatures. Whether or not this decision to emulate stop motion characters was a good idea is up for debate. In my opinion, it makes the movements of the characters in this film look really weird, because I'm not used to computer animated characters moving that way. But I do understand why they did it.
Wow, that's nice and bright. What kind of candles are those?
Bean of Nikkei. Must be Italian.
Lose the candle.
As the film inched closer and closer to being completed, they still didn't have a distributor. Throughout its production, Hoodwinked was shown to a number of distributors, including DreamWorks, who made a distribution offer, but the directors passed on it since it wasn't a great deal. But at the last second, the film finally found a distributor, when it was screened at the Cannes Film Festival. Film producer and future convicted sex offender, Harvey Weinstein, and his brother Bob were also at the Cannes Film Festival, screening Robert Rodriguez's film, Sin City. Hoodwinked was actually brought to Weinstein's attention by Robert Rodriguez's wife, whose attorney also happened to work for Blue Yonder Films. The Weinsteins came in at the perfect time, because they had just left Disney and were looking for films to distribute. They loved the idea of picking up an animated film and giving Disney a run for their money, so they jumped at the chance. The partnership between the Hoodwinked crew and the Weinsteins was very smooth, as they didn't tamper too much with the creative vision of the film and added great suggestions, such as enlisting the help of Skywalker Sound and helping the film with some pacing issues. And they also helped by adding new voice actors to the flick. One thing you'll notice about this film and what really helped it hit at the box office is the voice cast. Patrick Warburton and Andy Dick were on board from the very beginning. However, a lot of the big names, such as Glenn Close, Jim Belushi, and Anne Hathaway, were added in later on, once the Weinstein Company picked up the film. Obviously, having a big producer like Harvey Weinstein helped get these big names attached to the project. But a downside of this is that a lot of these big actors took the spots of the original voice actors who had already recorded their lines. Although they still got minor roles in the film, iconic voice actors such as Tara Strong and Tom Kenny were recast, which is unfortunate because I bet they gave some great performances in the original film. Additionally, since the animation was already done, all these new voice actors couldn't improv or add anything new to the characters. There's a lot of jokes you'll see online concerning Hoodwinked where people will say they spent all their money on the voice cast and had nothing left over for the animation, so that's why the film looks so bad. But as you can see, all of the big name actors were attached to the project after the film was already made, and the cost of those actors may have landed with the Weinstein Company rather than Blue Yonder Films or Can Bar Entertainment. That's also why there's probably so many different sources with different figures for the budget. Hoodwinked was originally supposed to come out on Christmas Day in 2005, but it was moved to January 13th, 2006 to avoid competition with other films released during the holiday season. However, it did have a limited one-week release in Los Angeles on December 16th, 2005 to qualify for Oscar consideration. Unfortunately, it never got that Oscar nomination, even though I think it deserved it. But that was also the same year that Crash won over Brokeback Mountain, so the Academy wasn't exactly filled with people who had taste. In its opening 4-day weekend, it grossed $16 million and was actually $50,000 away from being first at the box office, right behind the film Glory Road. In the US, it went on to make $51 million, and overseas it made $58 million for a total worldwide gross of $110 million. And for a film whose original budget was $8 million, that means this film was super profitable, and went on to make even more money in the physical media market. as the film was the best-selling DVD in its initial week of release, selling over 700,000 copies and making over $13.5 million. As much as I hate Harvey Weinstein and think he's the scum of the earth, this film would not have been a success without the involvement from the Weinstein Company, which is an unfortunate stain on the legacy of this film. Even though it did numbers at the box office and physical release, the reviews were a bit more mixed. It currently holds a 46% critic and a 56% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which I feel is way too harsh. The critic consensus is as follows: this fractured fairy tale doesn't have the wit or animation quality to compete with the likes of the Shrek franchise. At the time of the film's release, the first Shrek movie was still very much fresh in people's minds, and Shrek 2 had just come out a year before, which made almost $1 billion and was a huge deal. So naturally, there were a lot of comparisons to a film with a similar concept of fairy tale revisionism. Also, a fair amount of hate was thrown at the film for the poor animation. Listen, I totally get it, but just because a movie has bad animation, that doesn't discredit the great story, the characters, and the comedy. And although the animation certainly hasn't stood the test of time, the script really has, as I think the way this film tells its story is super inventive and way different from any other animated kids movie. Hoodwinked went on to have a terrible sequel in 2011, but that's a video for another day.
Keith, watch out for Keith.
So that's the bizarre story behind 2005's Hoodwinked. It was one of the first independent computer animated feature films made on a tiny budget of $8 million. It was almost entirely funded by the creator of Sky Vodka and was animated overseas in the Philippines. But despite all the obstacles the film ran into, it overcame them and went on to gross over $100 million. Its legacy will forever be intertwined with the terrible animation, which is unfortunate because it has so much more to offer. If you haven't seen it, or haven't seen it since you were a kid, I highly recommend a rewatch. If you have seen it, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. This has been Tom from Eisenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. See you next week.